everyone, just giving you a bit of an update on reliable and trustworthy sources. This is part of your CAT where you are analysing the two different sources. Now, with reliable and trustworthy sources, we're going to be looking at determining whether a source is trustworthy and reliable, so by identifying it, and by justifying why you think that this is the case. First thing we're going to look at is, of course, what they both mean. So as you can see here, I've got two definitions that both really mean roughly the same thing. Something being reliable is it fit to be trusted? So can it be trusted? And trustworthiness is talking about it deserves your confidence. So you should have confidence in it. Both of them using a synonym here rather, of being dependable. So what makes something dependable? When you can use it in this context, when you can use it to learn something about a topic you're looking at, for example, in this case, ancient China, that makes it dependable. So is it telling you fact? Is it something you can learn? I've got this source here. This is a primary source because it was made at the time of ancient China's existence, and it's talking about what Confucius was teaching. It is, in fact, written by Confucius itself. It's a quote. The quote says, "Fine words and an insinuating appearance are seldom associated with true virtue." So essentially what he's saying here is that saying fancy words and, making yourself look like something that you're not isn't actually showing who you really are. So it's not showing that you as a person can be trusted. So essentially what he's teaching the people in ancient China is that you need to be honest and upfront with who you are as a person, not trying to put on this show of who you might be. So why is this a source that is dependable? First of all, we're going to be looking at this acronym here. It's the CAR acronym. There's some other variations of it. For us, we're going to be using CAR. So CAR stands for whether something is current, has currency, its authorship, so who created it, the reason it was created, and whether it is reliable. So we're going to go through each one by one. So this source is telling us a bit about what Confucius was teaching the people in ancient China, and the effect that this had was to change the way that they approached their lives in ancient China. So using this as a teaching, they thought, okay, well, if we've got to be honest and upfront about who we are, we should place a lot of value in honesty and in trust rather than in somebody trying to show off or pretend that they're something more than they actually are. So let's say that you were, a reasonable person inside, you earned, a good amount of money. If you tried to make yourself look really, really, really rich, that was what Confucius was saying was not true virtue. So you're not really being honest with the people around you. So if I look at our CAR acronym here, when was this source made? Well, this source was made in between these times, between 479 and 221 BC. All right? So that means it was made at the time of Confucius. So what does this mean? This time frame of when the source was made was the time that Confucius was alive. So that shows me that the source here is trustworthy for the time frame that it was created in, because it is from Confucius' actual time. Who created it? Well, Confucius did. And why is this make this a dependable source? It makes a dependable source because Confucius, this shows us Confucius's thinking from his own words, not someone's interpretation. It's his own words, not what somebody else is telling us he taught. It's his own words and we're reading it. So why was this source made? Well, this comes from a book, a series of books called the Confucius Analects, which is the equivalent of like the Bible or the Quran in Confucius's philosophies and teaching. So this was created by Confucius to teach other people about his philosophy or thinking. Alright? So why is this then a dependable source? Well, it is directly showing us his philosophy, not opinions about it or other people's thoughts on it, interpretations of it. So not what they thought it meant, but what he actually meant. So is it a reliable source? Well, if it was made at the time and it's made by him and for the purpose of teaching about his philosophy, and we want to learn about his philosophy, yes, it is reliable. And it's reliable because it demonstrates Confucius's teaching directly from him. Nobody else is thinking, it's his own thinking on all of this. So with that regard, that makes it a reliable source. Now, if it's a secondary source, that doesn't necessarily make it unreliable, right? What it means is you need to be able to demonstrate where the author got their information from. Let's say this, for example, here, this is actually not a primary source. The book itself is the primary source. My quote from it becomes a secondary source. And I've put the quote here underneath. This slide is the secondary source, not the book itself or the quote. The slide is a secondary source. And I've put where I got it from. So it would be reliable as well because I'm telling you where I've got the information from. If I just wrote on here, take that off, and I wrote Confucius said this, well, how do you know that? There's no way that you can go and check on it, yeah? For example, if I had a quote that said, people should go and eat fried chicken twice a week. It's good for your soul. And I said, Confucius said this in 467 BC. Unless I can demonstrate that there's a source for this, so let's say he said it in the Confucius chicken guide, I can go and check whether this actually exists, and obviously it doesn't exist, so this would not be a reliable source. Essentially, what you're trying to do is work out whether the source you're using can be trusted. So can you look at the information on it? Is it reliable? Is it trustworthy? Is it factual? If not, then it is not a dependable source. Now, all information that is in textbooks and things like that, if they come from somewhere, for example, like a painting or a table or something like that, if they have a source that is identified, you can go and check it and see whether it is a reliable source. If you can't find who made a secondary source, if you can't find one of these, then it is not a reliable source. Hope that's cleared up a little bit more. Anyway, see how you go, and we will talk more when term comes back. Farewell.